By the late 19th century, the 600-year-old Ottoman Empire was bleeding out. Once an unmatched global superpower, its borders were now contracting, heavily pressured by rival empires and internal fractures. To understand the extent of the damage, you have to look at the treasury. This chart tracks the Ottoman state's finances. Between 1854 and 1874, the empire took on massive foreign loans. By the time Sultan Abdulhamid II took the throne, the annual debt and interest payments completely dwarfed the empire's normal tax revenues. Looking at this revenue bar, European creditors forced the creation of a powerful oversight body in 1881 to ensure they got paid, the Duyun Umumiye. This European-controlled institution reached right into the Ottoman economy, directly siphoning off roughly 30% of the state's revenues. This level of economic subjugation left the absolute top of the Ottoman leadership feeling deeply vulnerable. The realization that Western powers could strangle the state from within bred an intense, suffocating paranoia in the halls of power. Sultan Abdulhamid II had watched his two immediate predecessors get violently dragged from the throne. He was determined not to be the third. Convinced that the standard bureaucracy was riddled with foreign agents and traitors, Abdulhamid systematically bypassed the traditional government. He centralized the administration of the entire empire into his own secluded compound, the Yildiz Palace. To maintain this grip, he built the Hafiya, a massive, empire-wide surveillance network. Informants monitored the daily movements of bureaucrats, military officers, and ordinary citizens, ready to crush any whispers of dissent before they could spread. But this dragnet had a severe unintended consequence. Rather than securing loyalty, the constant surveillance drove a generation of angry, Western-educated military officers out of the light and into highly organized, secret underground cells. By attempting to lock down his empire through fear and total control, the Sultan inadvertently trained and radicalized the very forces that would ultimately threaten his crown. While managing threats at home, Abdulhamid sought a way to push back against Western imperialism abroad. He leaned heavily on his secondary title, Caliph of the Islamic world. Through a policy of Pan-Islamism, he aimed to unite Muslims from North Africa to India, turning their sheer numbers into a geopolitical shield. This ideology needed a physical anchor. The Sultan proposed the Hejaz Railway, a massive infrastructure project designed to stretch from Istanbul all the way down into the Holy Lands. What made the railway remarkable was how it was built. Facing a bankrupt treasury, Abdulhamid funded the project entirely through global donations from everyday Muslims. It was an engineering marvel, built completely independent of Western banks and foreign leverage. The railway successfully amplified the Sultan's prestige worldwide. But in the capital, the glow of Pan-Islamism couldn't hide the suffocating reality of absolute rule, and those secret cells of military officers were finally reaching their breaking point. These officers formed the core of a coalition known as the Young Turks. They believed the only way to save the empire from rotting from the inside was to force a return to parliamentary rule, demanding liberty, equality, and a reinstated constitution. Because they were military men, they brought strict discipline to their rebellion. To evade Abdulhamid's network of spies, they adopted the deeply secretive organizational structures of Masonic lodges, operating in the shadows for years. In July 1908, the tension finally snapped. Young Turk officers in Macedonia took to the mountains with their troops in open, armed rebellion. Outmaneuvered and terrified of losing his life, the Sultan caved, formally reinstating the constitution. But the celebration was violently cut short. Sensing the internal chaos, foreign powers pounced. Within days, Austria-Hungary annexed Bosnia, Bulgaria declared independence, and Crete announced its union with Greece. The Young Turks' promise to stabilize the empire had instantly resulted in massive territorial losses. The illusion of a smooth, bloodless transition shattered, leaving a massive power vacuum in the capital. By April 1909, Istanbul was a powder keg. The city was deeply divided between those defending the new constitutional liberties and those longing for the familiarity of the Sultan's traditional authority. That tension exploded into the 31 March incident, a violent counter-revolution that flooded the streets of the capital. The mutiny was driven by a deep cultural rift within the military itself. Traditional, religiously conservative soldiers, known as the Alaili, turned their rifles on their modern, Western-educated commanders, the Mektepli, demanding an end to the new regime. For a few days, it looked as if the Sultan would ride the chaos back to absolute power. Realizing they were about to lose everything, the Young Turks had to escalate the conflict to a point of no return. Regrouping in Salonika, the Young Turks rapidly assembled a retaliatory strike force, appropriately named the Action Army. They marched back on Istanbul, engaged in heavy street fighting, and methodically cleared out the barracks holding the mutineers. With the city secured, they made their final move. Sultan Abdulhamid II was permanently stripped of his crown. In his place, they installed his brother, Sultan Mehmed V Rashad. But this was a hollowed-out throne. The new sultan was entirely under military control, marking the definitive death of absolute monarchy in the Ottoman Empire. Taking the reins of a rapidly disintegrating state, the victorious officers realized that neither traditional Ottoman unity nor Pan-Islamism could stop the bleeding. In their desperation, they turned to a new, sharper collective identity to hold their remaining lands together: Turkism. Sultan Abdulhamid II's obsession with control created the very conditions for his downfall, forging a battle-hardened, politically radicalized military. And the brutal ideological warfare fought in the shadows of his reign provided the exact blueprint those officers would use to build the modern Turkish Republic from the ashes of the empire.